Hello, good evening, everybody. Good evening. Let's continue the reading of Rich Dad Poor Dad. We had started with the reading of the introduction of the book Rich Dad Poor Dad. So we'll wait for another 5 seconds and then continue the reading. As you all know, Rich Dad Poor Dad is the book authored by Robert Kiyosaki, and we were reading about the different advices his rich dad and poor dad would give him. So there were different beliefs that Robert Kiyosaki was presenting about what his rich dad would tell him and what his poor dad would tell him. I'll go one paragraph behind and then we will continue. The other dad believed in total financial self reliance. He spoke out against the entitlement mentality and how it created weak and financially needy people. He was emphatic about being financially competent. We read that the poor dad believed in taking benefits from the government, taking working towards salaries, working towards pay rises, retirement plan, and all that. He was very happy about being entitled to the benefits of his work that he would get in the retirement age of his life. But the rich dad believed in total financial self-reliance, so he always emphasized being totally financially competent. We'll continue. One dad struggled to save a few dollars. The other created investments. One dad taught me how to write an impressive resume so I could find a good job. The other taught me how to write strong business and financial plans so I could create jobs. Being a product of two strong dads allowed me the luxury of observing the effects different thoughts have on one's life. I noticed that people really do shape their lives through their thoughts. For example, my poor dad always said, I will never be rich, and that prophecy became reality. My rich dad, on the other hand, always referred to himself as rich. He would say things like, I am a rich man, and rich people don't do this. Even when he was flat broke after a major financial setback, he continued to refer to himself as a rich man. He would cover himself by saying, there is a difference between being poor and being broke. Broke is temporary, poor is eternal. I want you all to pay attention to a few very powerful things that are mentioned here. You know, both dads that Robert Kiyosaki refers to were strong people. One would teach him how to create very powerful resumes so he can get good job. The other one taught him how to create very strong business and financial plans so that he could create jobs. See, ultimately everybody are associated with jobs. You need to be associated with a job. The question is, do you want to be the one who is taking the job, or do you want to be the one who is giving the job? If you want to take a job, you need to write a good resume. If you want to create jobs, you need to be able to create business and financial plans. What will you sell? How will you make money? How will you take care of your expenses? All of those need to be planned and you need to prepare on those. Very great advantage that Robert Kiyosaki talks about that he had was he had two strong dads who gave him different thoughts on the different aspects of life. Now he was influenced by both. He was getting input of both. And these thoughts gave him a contrast, and the thoughts shaped his life. Revisit this thought here, revisit this sentence here. I noticed that people really do shape their lives through their thoughts. So Robert Kiyosaki says he noticed that people can shape their lives through their thoughts. We always keep thinking that we need to do something to make our lives better. And what is that something that will make our lives better according to Robert Kiyosaki and his experiences? Our thoughts. If you have powerful thoughts, you will become powerful. If you have weak thoughts, you will become weak. Example is what he gives here. He says his poor dad always said that I will never be rich. He continued to keep telling that he will never be rich, and that prophecy came true. His poor dad never became rich. But on the other hand, his rich dad kept on referring him to himself as rich. He would say, I am a rich man and rich people don't do these things. It is not when you have a lot of money that you are rich. It is when you have the mindset of being rich that you are rich, is what Robert Kiyosaki talks about here. Even when he was flat broke after a major financial setback, even when he was flat broke means he had lost all his money and he was in a very bad financial situation, he would still refer to himself as a rich man. Why is that? He says, remember this: being broke is temporary, being poor is eternal. Poor is a state of mind, being broke is temporary. You can always work and get back to a good financial state, but if you are poor in your mind. So my poor dad would say, I am not interested in money, or money doesn't matter. My rich dad always said, money is power. The power of our thoughts may never be measured or appreciated, but it became obvious to me as a young boy that it was important to be aware of my thoughts and how I expressed myself. I noticed that my poor dad was poor not because of the amount of money he earned, which was significant, but because of his thoughts and actions. As a young boy having two fathers, I became acutely aware of being careful about which thoughts I chose to adopt as my own. Should I listen to my rich dad or to my poor dad? Keep a check on what you think. Keep a check on your thoughts, because remember, your thoughts are designing your life. So it is not your work that will design your life. It is what you think about yourself, what you think you want to do, what you think you are doing, what you think about what you do, and what you think about yourself that designs your life. Continue reading. Although both men had tremendous respect for education and learning, they disagreed about what they thought was important to learn. One wanted me to study hard, earn a degree, and get a good job to earn money. He wanted me to study to become a professional, an attorney, or an astronaut, an accountant, and to go to business school for my MBA. The other encouraged me to study to be rich, to understand how money works, and to learn how to have it work for me. I don't work for money, were his words. He would repeat over and over, money works for me. I repeat, the rich dad said that he doesn't work for money, and money works for him. It's a very powerful thing. Keep this in mind. Don't work for money, but make money work for you. How to do that? We will learn as the book progresses. At the age of 9, I decided to listen to and learn from my rich dad about money. In doing so, I chose not to listen to my poor dad, even though he was the one with all the college degrees. Look at the age at which Robert Kiyosaki decided what kind of thoughts to adopt. He decided at the age of 9 that he will listen to his rich dad and develop a powerful mindset. But on the other hand, who did he have? He had a father, he had his own biological father who had a lot of college degrees, who was very well educated than his rich dad, but he decided to listen to his rich dad and not to his poor dad. A lesson from Robert Frost. Robert Frost is my favorite poet. Although I love many of his poems, my favorite is The Road Not Taken. I use its lessons almost daily. I read the poem of Robert Frost given in this book, The Road Not Taken. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both. And be one traveler long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could, to where it bent in the undergrowth, then took the other as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear, though as for that the passing there had worn them really about the same, and both that morning equally lay in leaves, no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh. Somewhere ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. And that has made all the difference. Over the years, I have often reflected upon Robert Frost's poem. Choosing not to listen to my highly educated dad's advice and attitude about money was a painful decision, but it was a decision that shaped the rest of my life. Once I made up my mind about whom to listen to, my education about money began. My rich dad taught me over a period of 30 years until I was 39 years old. He stopped once he realized that I knew and fully understood what he had been trying to drum into my often thick skull. Money is one form of power, but what is more powerful is financial education. Money comes and goes, but if you have the education about how money works, you gain power over it and can begin building wealth. The reason positive thinking alone does not work is because most people went to school and never learned how money works. So they spend their lives working for money. See, if you notice the things that have been given here in the poem that Robert Kiyosaki gives, the poem of Robert Frost, it speaks about the road less taken, meaning the road on which few people travel. See, always you will have choices. You have two choices. You have to choose either of them. You cannot choose both. You cannot walk on two roads at the same time. You have to choose to travel on one road, on one path. And that one path will take you wherever it takes. It takes you through ups and downs. It takes you through further paths. It will give you further choices as you keep moving ahead on that. But you have to keep walking on that. Sometimes you might feel I could have gone on the other path, but there is no way to go back. You have to keep walking on the path that you have chosen. And if that path is the less chosen one, you will not have many people walking with you. In a common path, in a common road where everybody takes, you will have people along with you. You will feel good about having people around you because there are many people walking on that path. But if your path that you chose for your life is less traveled or nobody walks on that path, then you will feel lonely. But remember, that is what will make all the difference, is what the poem of Robert Frost talks about. You keep walking on the path that you choose, you keep walking on the path that you believe in, and you will make a you'll arrive at a destination which will be a destination that is suited for you. And here, Robert Kiyosaki, once he made a decision to listen to his rich dad, he says his true education about money began. He started his education with his rich dad at the age of 9. And how many years did he go on to study with him? How many years did he learn about money with from his rich dad? For 30 years. So until he was 39 years of age. How many years of education do we get from schools? We get about 15 to 18 years of education from schools, but Robert Kiyosaki got education about money from his rich dad for about 30 years. When did it stop? It stopped when the rich dad decided to stop it, when he realized that Robert Kiyosaki had understood what his rich dad wanted him to understand. You get it? Anything that will matter to life, anything that will make our lives better is a continuous learning process. It will not end. Only the formal education that is required to make a living ends, but the education that is necessary to make our lives better will never end. It will continue and continue and continue, and we have to keep learning forever. So that is what Robert Kiyosaki emphasizes in his book also. So money is one form of power. I continue to read now. Money is one form of power. But what is more powerful is financial education. Education about money is more important. Money comes and goes, but if you have the education about how money works, you gain power over it and can begin building wealth. Having money is not enough, having wealth is more important. To develop wealth or to create wealth, you need to have education about money. All right. So why most people, even if they are positive, do not make enough money, because they don't learn how money works. And unless you learn how money works, you cannot make money work for you. You will continue to keep working for money. Because I was only 9 years old when I started, the lessons my rich dad taught me were simple. And when it was all said and done, there were only six main lessons repeated over 30 years. This book is about those six lessons, put as simply as possible, just as simply as my rich dad put forth those lessons for me. The lessons are meant not to be answers, but guideposts that will assist you and your children to grow wealthier, no matter what happens in a world of increasing change and uncertainty. This this completes the introduction of the book. In the conclusion of this introduction, Robert Kiyosaki says, though he got education for over 30 years, it was only six simple lessons that his rich dad gave him over and over and over and over again. So in this book, he says he will give this education for for all of us to learn the six lessons that he learned from his rich dad. So this completes the introduction of the book, and now we will go into lesson 1. Lesson 1 is the chapter 1 of this book, and as I had read about it yesterday, I had read the index yesterday. Lesson 1 is the rich don't work for money. The rich don't work for money. The poor and the middle class work for money. The rich have money work for them. Dad, can you tell me how to get rich? My dad put down the evening paper. Why do you want to get rich, son? Because today Jimmy's mom drove up in their new Cadillac and they were going to their beach house for the weekend. He took three of his friends, but Mike and I weren't invited. They told us we weren't invited because we were poor kids. They did? My dad asked incredulously. Yeah, they did, I replied in a hurt tone. My dad silently shook his head, pushed his glasses up the bridge of his nose, and went back to reading the paper. I stood waiting for an answer. The year was 1956. I was 9 years old. By some twist of fate, I attended the same public school where the rich people sent their kids. We were primarily a sugar plantation town. The managers of the plantation and the other affluent people, such as doctors, business owners, and bankers, sent their children to this elementary school. After grade 6, their children were generally sent off to private schools. Because my family lived on one side of the street, I went to this school. Had I lived on the other side of the street, I would have gone to a different school with kids from families more like mine. After grade 6, these kids and I would go on to the public intermediate and high school. There was no private school for them or for me. My dad finally put down the paper. I could tell he was thinking. Well, son, he began slowly. If you want to be rich, you have to learn to make money. How do I make money? I asked. Well, use your head, son, he said, smiling. Even then, I knew that really meant that's all I'm going to tell you, or I don't know the answer, so don't embarrass me. A partnership is formed. The next morning, I told my best friend Mike what my dad had said. As best as I could tell, Mike and I were the only poor kids in the school. Mike was also in this school by a twist of fate. Someone had drawn a jog in the line for the school district, and we wound up in school with the rich kids. We weren't really poor, but we felt as if we were, because all the other boys had new baseball gloves, new bicycles, new everything. Mom and dad provided us with the basics like food, shelter, and clothes. But that was about it. My dad used to say, if you want something, work for it. We wanted things, but there was not much work available for 9-year-old boys. So what do we do to make money? Mike asked. I don't know, I said. But do you want to be my partner? He agreed. And so on that Sunday morning, Mike became my first business partner. We spent all morning coming up with ideas on how to make money. Occasionally, we talked about all the cool guys at Jimmy's beach house having fun. It hurt a little, but that hurt was good because it inspired us to keep thinking of a way to make money. Finally, that afternoon, a bolt of lightning struck. It was an idea Mike got from a science book he had read. Excitedly, we shook hands, and the partnership now had a business. If you pay attention to what's going on here, see, it talks about the education system they have in the US. Public schools will have children going to those public schools based on where they live. So these children, because they lived in a particular part of the town, they had to go to a particular public school. Public school means government schools. Private schools are the private schools which are run by private institutions. Now, Robert and Mike both were kids of fathers who were not very rich, but they were good enough. But the other kids who were going to those schools, their classmates were all very rich. So these kids started feeling poor. Robert and Mike wanted to do a business together. They started thinking of ideas how to do a business together. And suddenly, from a science book that Mike had read, they got an idea of how to do business, what to do, what business to do. So they thought of doing the business, and Robert and Mike became business partners at the age of 9. So it's a business of two small boys who wanted to experiment with making money. For the next several weeks, Mike and I ran around our neighborhood, knocking on doors and asking our neighbors if they would save their toothpaste tubes for us. You might also be getting curious about what the business was. Now they are going around the neighborhood, knocking on doors, asking people to save their toothpaste tubes for them. With puzzled looks, most adults consented with a smile. Some asked us what we were doing, to which we replied, "We can't tell you, it's a business secret." My mom grew distressed as the weeks wore on. We had selected a site next to her washing machine as the place we would stockpile our raw materials. In a brown cardboard box that at one time held catsup bottles, our little pile of used toothpaste tubes began to grow. Finally, my mom put her foot down. The sight of her neighbor's messy, crumpled, used toothpaste tubes had got into her. "What are you boys doing?" she asked. "And I don't want to hear again that it's a business secret. Do something with this mess, or I am going to throw it out." Mike and I pleaded and begged, explaining that we would soon have enough and then we would begin production. We informed her that we were waiting on a couple of neighbors to finish their toothpaste so we could have their tubes. Mom granted us a 1 week extension. So they are doing some business with the tubes. They are collecting all the toothpaste tubes and planning to do something. The date to begin production was moved up and the pressure was on. My first partnership was already being threatened with an eviction notice by my own mom. It became Mike's job to tell the neighbors to quickly use up their toothpaste, saying their dentist wanted them to brush more often anyway. I began to put together the production line. What are they producing? Let's wait and see. One day, my dad drove up with a friend to see two 9-year-old boys in the driveway with the production line operating at full speed. Full speed. There was fine white powder everywhere. On a long table were small milk cartons from school, and our family's hibachi grill was glowing with red hot coals at maximum heat. Dad walked up cautiously, having to park the car at the base of the driveway since the production line blocked the carport. As he and his friend got closer, they saw a steel pot sitting on top of the coals in which the toothpaste tubes were being melted down. In those days, toothpaste did not come in plastic tubes. The tubes were made of lead. So once the paint was burned off, the tubes were dropped in the small steel pot. They melted until they became liquid, and with my mom's pot holders, we poured the lead through a small hole in the top of the milk cartons. The milk cartons were filled with plaster of Paris. White powder was everywhere. In my haste, I had knocked the bag over, and the entire area looked like it had been hit by a snowstorm. The milk cartons were the outer containers for plaster of Paris molds. So these kids were manufacturing plaster of Paris molds from used toothpaste tubes. My dad and his friend watched as we carefully poured the molten lead through a small hole in the top of the plaster of Paris cube. Careful, my dad said. I nodded without looking up. Finally, once the pouring was through, I put the steel pot down and smiled at my dad. What are you boys doing? He asked with a cautious smile. We are doing what you told me to do. We are going to be rich, I said. Yup, said Mike, grinning and nodding his head. We are partners. And what is in those plaster molds? My dad asked. Watch, I said. This should be a good batch. With a small hammer, I tapped at the seal that divided the cube in half. Cautiously, I pulled up the top half of the plaster mold and a lead nickel fell out. Oh no, my dad exclaimed. You are casting nickels out of lead? That's right, Mike said. We are doing as you told us to do. We are making money. My dad's friend turned and burst into laughter. My dad smiled and shook his head. Along with the fire and a box of spent toothpaste tubes, in front of him were two little boys covered with white dust smiling from ear to ear. He asked us to put everything down and sit with him on the front step of our house. With a smile, he gently explained what the word counterfeiting meant. So, if you have understood, what was the business that they were doing? They were they were trying to make coins. They were trying to make money using all the toothpaste tubes which had lead. Toothpaste tubes in the earlier days, as they mentioned, would contain lead. So they would melt, remove all the um, paint from the tubes, melt the lead, and then pour it into a mold and make money. Now his Mike's father had to explain what counterfeiting meant. Counterfeiting means making fake things of something. So counterfeit money means fake money, duplicate money, which is not valid for circulation. Now, what happens to these kids? What happens to these kids uh, when all their effort of so many weeks went down the drain? They wanted to become rich. They did so many experiments. They worked on so many things and made money, but that money is counterfeit. We continue reading. Our dreams were dashed. You mean this is illegal? Asked Mike in a quivering voice. Let them go, my dad's friend said. They might be developing a natural talent. My dad glared at him. Yes, it is illegal, my dad said gently. But you boys have shown great creativity and original thought. Keep going. I'm really proud of you. Disappointed, Mike and I sat in silence for about 20 minutes before we began cleaning up our mess. The business was over on opening day. Sweeping the powder up, I looked at Mike and said, I guess Jimmy and his friends are right. We are poor. We will close today's reading at this point. See, Mike and Robert Kiyosaki wanted to become rich. They wanted to make money. They asked their dad about how to become rich. And dad said, make money, make more money, and you will become rich. But with this, they thought about how to make money and they started minting money by using a method that they had learned from their science book. Obviously, that money that you mint will not be legal tender. It will not be legal money. What the banks give you is legal money. What you make is not legal money. It is illegal. So, without knowing all that, they put in so much effort. They used so much of their creativity and with a lot of enthusiasm, they made money, which ultimately turned out to be fake money. And when they realized it, when their dad told them, they became disappointed. Both of them looked at each other. Robert said to Mike, maybe Jimmy and his friends are right. Jimmy and his friends are the other kids at school who belong to rich families. Robert said, maybe they are right. We are poor because we don't have as much money as they do. One thought I would like to carry with you tonight before you go to bed is, you might do a lot of things with a lot of enthusiasm, with a lot of expectation, with a lot of creativity and original thought. But at the end of all that effort, you might have to face disappointment. You might have to face disappointment and feel as though you are worthless, feel as though you have nothing or you have got nothing to do. Disappointment is a part of the game called life. Without disappointment, you will not keep moving forward. When there are aspirations, when there are dreams, and you are working towards dreams, when you are working towards something that you want to do, disappointments are common. Robert Kiyosaki and his friend Mike felt disappointed and they felt disgusted. What they did further, we will look at it tomorrow as we continue reading the story from where we have left today. We are leaving today's story at the point where the first business that Robert Kiyosaki started at the age of 9, trying to produce money with his friend Mike, failed because what they were producing was illegal, and both of them felt very, very disappointed at the failure of their business, primarily because they did not know what they were trying to do was illegal. All right, so we'll stop it at this. We will continue the first lesson of Robert Kiyosaki, that the rich don't work for money, the rich make money work for them, tomorrow. In tomorrow again, 10 p.m., we will meet and we will continue. All right. See you all then. 30 seconds if anybody wants to say something, and then we will close the stream. All right. So we will end the stream. I'll see you all tomorrow. Until then, good night. Bye bye. Good night, everybody.